it actually made me realize I was the problem. I was frustrated with the team. I was the problem, right? And it actually raised my self-awareness enough to know in these situations, I needed to ask myself, what role am I playing?
Welcome to Tip Top Grow Up Your Business with Metronomics. Join me, Shannon Burns-Husko, and Metronomics certified coach, Ged Roberts.
We'll be talking to business thought leaders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business team coaches who have all taken the journey to grow up their businesses to their tip top.
We'll be sharing strategies, systems, stories, on how you can grow your company up at the speed you want.
If you're searching for your path to the tip top and feel your time is running out, then this podcast is for you. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to the Metronomics podcast. Today I'm with Peter Oxley. Peter, how are you?
Doing great today, Jed. Thanks.
Yeah, so I've known Peter for 2-3 years now, I'd say. Peter is also a fellow Metronomics coach based out of Vancouver, a place I love to go to. I'm not a skier, but I do love going to Vancouver. So, Peter, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, Jed, I think we're going to talk a little bit about my past as a reformed 3 times entrepreneur. I have eaten a tremendous amount of glass over the course of my career. But as we always talk about, the failures are the most powerful learning moments. I absolutely loved scaling my first business, but it consumed me, right? And that absolutely culminated in a trip to the emergency room, which we'll probably get to that story. And I knew something had to change, right? And that started the journey with Metronomics over a course of a decade as a coached Metronomics client. It changed my life. And after exiting my last venture, I became a certified coach with a mission to try and help as many CEOs and entrepreneurs avoid the mistakes, the learning, help navigate through those waters, and have a great business and a really thriving personal life. It's an and, it's not an or. And many of us suffer through having a great business and not having a very great personal life.
Absolutely. And using that expression, eating glass, I mean, that sounds painful because we often talk about, you need to spend more time working on the business rather than in the business. And that sounds so easy, doesn't it? That sounds so easy. But the reality is it's incredibly difficult to do. And that's the reason, as you say, that a lot of CEOs, a lot of entrepreneurs just spend their time totally absorbed by their business at the expense of many, many other things in their life, including their families, their marriages, their kids, and all sorts of other areas. So let's jump right back to the beginning where you first started out and take us through. And as from your introduction, it sounds like there were some trigger points or there were some sort of some key moments where you thought something's got to change. And what led you to those decision points, those key points of inflection that made you make the decisions that you made at the time?
Yeah, and I'm going to preface this all with I'm a slow learner. Like it took me a long time to actually get to where I needed to be. But I would say I really suffered as a founder, a co-founder in my first venture from the grinded out culture. Like I thought if 40 hours a week is good, then 80 must be twice as good, right? Twice as good. And I thought I just need to out hustle the competition, work harder, right? Work harder. And don't get me wrong, hard work is necessary to grow a business and to scale up a business. I'm not trying to say it isn't. Problem is, I got on the hamster wheel, right? I started to become the chief firefighter. I had a fantastic team. Like the talent that we had around us was not the problem. I was not leveraging them well. I would fill in any of the little cracks where there was things that weren't clear. I would jump in. I love to fight a good fire. And then I started to get sucked into chaos. I found myself frustrated. I would say things, and I even hear my coaching clients say these same things today. Um, I've hired good people. Why do I have to spoon feed them? Why do I need to tell them what they need to do? They should just know. And it's like, guess what? Our teams aren't psychic. They're not psychic. And I think the other thing is, um, when you get really tired and frustrated, you start to spin. And it's just faster to do things yourself than to actually teach someone or be clear in the articulation of what you want them to do. And so I actually found myself just jumping in and doing things. I was at a conference in Florida co-presenting to over 100 business owners last year, and the presenter asked the audience to finish this sentence. If you want something done right, and in unison, 100 CEOs said, you gotta do it yourself. And we know it's a trap. Like this is an absolute trap. And I was absolutely sucked into that whole mindset.
I was talking to a CEO just a couple of days ago, and he said almost exactly the same as what you just said there. I mean, he's recently sold off about two-thirds of his business, and he's now focusing on the last remaining third. And I said to him, so having sold off the other two-thirds, it must be so much easier. It must be great to just be able to focus on that smaller part, not have European, US hours because he sold off the international part of his business. And he said, no, it's just the same. No, I'm just diving into the stuff and rolling up the sleeves and, just getting in there. And I said, well, you tell me you've got a great team. You tell me that the people that are working for you are really good. And he said, yeah, but they can't do it just as well as I can. And I said, but at some point you've got to let go. And he said, well, if I let go, they'll make mistakes. And I said, but that's how they're going to learn. That's how they're going to get better. And he looked at me and he could see what I was saying was probably right, but he really did not want to let go of doing it himself. He really, really did not want to.
Yeah, I think you and I have talked about this, the Dan Martell "Buy Back Your Time" reference, which is, he's got a great expression in that book. 80% done by someone else is 100% freaking awesome, right? So we have to accept that even if we're the experts at stuff, lower the bar a bit and get someone else, get other people leaning against the wheel with us, right? So it's critical.
Yeah. One of the other things he said is, well, clients want to talk to me because they know I'll do it right. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And you're playing into their hands by sort of living that experience out for them. You've got to teach your next level. You've got to delegate down so you can elevate yourself, because you're not going to get time to work on the business unless you start doing that. And he knows it's right, but he just can't bring himself to do it.
Yes, and it's as we scale up our businesses, and we hit different levels of complexity, right? And we will, unless we actually bring the team in and really good A players to actually shoulder this burden with us, we tap out. We hit start to fray, right? And I was at this point in a downward spiral. Like I was frustrated, tired, not leveraging this great team that I'd put together. I gained about 35 pounds. I was neglecting my fitness, which just made me more sort of frustrated and stressed. I was, neglecting my wife. I was an absentee father to the two kids we're raising. So I kind of felt like I wasn't winning on either front, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel this, right? They are struggling at work and failing at home, right? And it's actually just a thankless place to be. And it's sort of totally counter to why we start businesses. We're supposed to get freedom and provide and stuff. So I was running on fumes, both personally and the business, and so much stress. And this culminated. I was supposed to be driving home. I was late. It was my wife's birthday. I'm driving home from work, racing home, and I'm like, I'm having a heart attack while I'm driving. I had just the worst pain in my chest. So I phone my wife, and she says, "Pull over! Like don't be driving as this is happening." Thankfully, there was a hospital really close. She came and met me, went through extensive tests. Now, the worst case thing was it wasn't a heart attack. It was a panic attack, right? Because I felt like, hey, heart attack, I can get surgery or take a pill for this. But a panic attack, when you've got that much anxiety, I had to solve this problem, right? And so that was for me to start on this arc towards Metronomics and getting help was I had to do things different. Really had to do things differently.
Now, if you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe. Peter's telling us about how he struggled to get out the weeds and stop eating glass, using his expression. And over the rest of this podcast, you're going to get some nuggets of gold from Peter's experience. So stay tuned and keep on listening. Peter, that must have been a really scary moment.
Yes, it was scary, but also signaled. I think, we all, I think all entrepreneurs are going to hit a ceiling. Mine was just pretty dire, right? So I'm using it as an example, but I think we all get caught in these moments where it's like, I'm stuck, right? I can't get to that next ceiling of growth, right? So I think, yes, Jed, it was scary, but when I look back now, it was actually a huge signal. Your body keeps the score on all this stress and all the heat. I didn't need to be the superhero. I wasn't playing a very good team sport. I needed to change, right? So this started my journey towards Metronomics, a very slow journey. And I wish I'd done it more quickly. So if I could impart any of the wisdom, it's like accelerate through some of these phases that I'm going to talk about.
Yeah. Mhm. So you had this revelation, something has to change. And you mentioned you're a slow learner. I'm sure you're a faster learner than you give yourself credit for. But having the realization doesn't make the change. So you made the realization. What happened from there? Because something's got to change in the short term. You got to do something. You got to do something to actually start that transition, to start that change happening. What happened from there?
Well, so I was a member of a roundtable with a bunch of other CEOs.
Is this the Bulldogs?
This was not the Bulldogs, but through the same organization, Ace Tech, which ultimately I met Shannon Susko through Metronomics founder. But this roundtable said, dude, you got to get some help. Like, you got to get some help. You got to get a coach. Right. So I didn't get a Metronomics coach. I got a one-on-one executive coach. Right. And that was a huge first move because really it actually made me realize I was the problem. I was frustrated with the team. I was the problem. Right. And it actually raised my self awareness enough to know in these situations, I needed to ask myself, what role am I playing in this situation? Right? Like that really great question, um, pointing out a lot of blind spots to me. Right? Pointing out that I was trying to be this hero, Superman carrying the company on my shoulders, and I would really just was not playing as a very good team player or leader to the organization. I was actually causing harm to the team and to the business. So that part was great about having a coach. The problem was there was no system to actually fix it. So I was like, now I was hungry I was like, okay, I got all these problems, but now what do I do? So, I'm an ex-management consultant. I just went out and started reading books, reading books, reading books. And along that journey, I found the Scaling Up System by Vern Harnish and started self-implementing. Very foolish again, self-implementing this because guess what? I'm still the smartest guy in the room, right?
Well, you don't need a coach, do you?
I don't need a coach. I'm a former management consultant. I've helped companies do this. I can just do this and be CEO. Of course I can. And the other issue was I was very frugal, and I was like, I can't afford to have a coach. Now I couldn't afford not to have a coach because all the gaffes that I was doing ended up having to lay some people off. It really was a trivial investment to have a coach. Um, so again, self-implementing. I went then down to the Vern Harnish's conference in LA, and Shannon was there, and she was just in the process of launching Metronomics, and I met her, and I begged her to take me on, and she's like, she's full, but she had one spot that came open in her group coaching practice, and I squeaked in there, right? And that was again another absolute game changer for me.
This was in '89 in Anaheim. Is that the Scaling Up conference you're thinking of?
I hope it wasn't 89, Jed.
Sorry.
I hope it was.
2019.
It was, yes.
We should leave that in. We should leave that in.
I know I'm
Revealing
old.
my age now, aren't I? Revealing my
I know
age.
I'm old, but yeah. Yeah, it was.
Anaheim just before COVID. Just before COVID.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
I
it
was there
was,
as well. Yeah.
but again, self-implementing, trying to learn the framework, trying to learn the tools. I had a good, smart team. They could see I was fumbling when I was self-implementing, right? I didn't understand what I was doing. I was trying to lay the track down and drive down it, facilitate the sessions, trying to participate in them. It just was not there. And I would say over half of my clients have self-implemented some type of system now. And then when we come in, they're just like, "Whew, this is like a breath of fresh air to get it coached in."
So you met Shannon?
I did, I did, and got into her roundtable. Group coached again with 6 to 8 other companies. I think the big thing is you're there with other CEOs and leadership teams, right? And that's a huge thing, is to go through this system and rolling it out as a team. Even if you're just one-on-one coached or group coached, you're doing it together as a team. And that was another huge learning thing for me. I love strategy. To this day, I love strategy. And I used to spend hours as a CEO just standing in my office at the whiteboard, scribbling out, working through scenarios, and then going out and giving the company the strategy, giving them the forecast, giving them the priorities. And guess what? No buy-in.
Nah. Mm-hmm.
No buy-in at all,
Yeah.
right? So
when you bring the tablets of stone down from the mountain, people don't like to receive the tablets of stone. Yeah.
And guess what? They were all hockey stick forecasts, right? They all just went flat, straight up to the right, right? So because I was raising venture financing too, so that was the picture. So I think just doing that together and learning how to actually forecast and prioritize was a game changer. That part of it, doing it as a team, was again really big about getting buy-in and using widgets versus just dollars. Again, widgets that we use in our system was again things that they could grasp. How many deals were they going to sell? How many clients did we need to implement? These types of things was again super positive change. And now it wasn't just me; it was the team.
Yeah. There's a reason why we call ourselves CEO plus leadership team coaches, because you gotta coach the team, not just the CEO.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because inevitably the CEO is initially not a great coach. So if you're just coaching the CEO and they then try and coach their teams, it's just not gonna work.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing. The coach is the blind spot detector, right? And I had a lot of BS that needed to be called out, right? And I think the benefit, we know this from sitting in with teams, is you can see the dynamic between the CEO and the other team members. And we can say, hold on a minute, let's just pause there and try and get the group input. Or is everyone picking up what, Peter's putting down? It was a real positive move towards getting a very inclusive culture in driving where the company was going as well.
So you started going through the Metronomics process. Now, what happened then?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, is scorecarding, and we'll actually talk about this. And I'll back up maybe and say I completely undervalued the soft systems, right? Inside, when I say soft systems, I mean the people, the human systems, the cultural system, the cohesive system that we work so much with, right? I only really focused on strategy and execution, right? But, you know, this is hearts versus minds stuff. And I did not value the softer side of the business. So I think getting the system coached in and working on it was incredible to make sure that we are lining up, having A players on the team, making sure they have scorecards where I'm actually forced to say what my expectations are for the person, what functions they're accountable for. So we're not all wearing the same hats, right? So going through the organization function chart is an amazing exercise, getting scorecards in place. And Jed, I felt, and I see this with other CEOs now that we're coaching, the frustration level comes way down because it's like, okay, there's not this, why don't they get it anymore? It's like they're forced to articulate what they want and a meeting of the minds about what we're signing up for, respectively, inside the organization. So that was a huge, just a game changer for me personally. that I needed to wring my brain out, and also play well as a team. This is a team sport, and we all have positions on the field that we need to play.
Yeah, that clarity of expectations is just so critical. You mentioned the story of this of yourself thinking, why don't they just get it? Why don't they just understand? And the leadership team members are not mind readers. So you've got to be super clear about your expectations, and scorecards are a great way of doing that. I remember working with a CEO. I'm not working with them anymore, and he came to me one day really frustrated with his COO. I actually talk about this in my book, Growth Through Confidence. And he came to me and said, like, no, he started off really well. He's been in place for about a year now, but something's just not right. He's just not getting it. And I said, well, what is he not getting? And he said, he went through a list of things that the COO wasn't doing. And I said, well, have you told him that that's what you expect him to do? And he looked at me really puzzled, and he said, well, shouldn't he know? And there wasn't an ounce of irony in that. There was just this assumption that because he wanted it done, that everyone would understand that that was what he wanted done. So you had this situation where the CEO is getting more and more frustrated. The COO is starting to walk on eggshells because he can see something's not right, but he can't see what it is. And there was they needed that circuit breaker, some way of actually getting together and saying, okay, this is what I need. And once that had happened, it was like, clarity of expectations. That's what you want. Why didn't you just say? It's like, well, I thought you knew.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. They are not mind readers. I love that. I love that. And, that frustration level, I think that's a gift that Metronomics gives to clients, is just getting that frustration level down, creating space and alignment between the team members so they know what positions they're playing on the field. Um, I think also divorcing the person from the scorecard, that
It's a
the
function.
scorecard is for the functional role, not written for Jed, right? And again, now we can assess your performance against that position on the field, and it makes the conversations much more objective and less sort of personal.
Just diving it on to scorecards. When do you start introducing scorecards when you work with a new client?
Immediately,
Yeah.
immediately, right?
First
So
quarter. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it's a deliverable for the head of company or the CEO, to get theirs done, right? So I'll tuck in and work on that almost immediately, because what we want to do is, get the marketing fluff out. This is not a job description. This is not what we're going to post out with a recruiter or on an online portal. Get rid of that fluff and just actually articulate, why does the person get paid? What are they accountable for? And how are you going to measure it? What skills and competencies do they need? Less is more, and crystal clear, right? So get rid of all the flowery adjectives and stuff in there and just actually make it clear. So working on it immediately, so they can actually share it with their team. And that starts the journey of getting the scorecards done, for the rest of the leadership team.
One of the things I often see is that it takes a while for people to realize the distinction between a scorecard and a review. So the scorecard is effectively the template, and a review is basically an instance of that template at a point in time where you can both have that open discussion about how you're going. And once people click, they think, okay, so performance reviews don't have to take ages anymore. And we can actually do them really quickly, and it's a conversation, and we're just focusing on the things that need to be focused on rather than all the other things that are not relevant to the conversation right now. And I see this fear of performance reviews because in most organizations, they just go on and on and on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and people dread them. The business stops when you get to performance review season. And it doesn't have to be like that. So straight away, you've taken sort of probably about 2 or 3 weeks of effort off people's plates, and just make the whole system, the whole process, a lot more accessible and a lot more efficient and effective. And but did you see that hatred, that resistance, that fear of that performance review process in the clients you work with?
I think performance reviews can be a trigger, right, for some people, right? 'Cause we've all had horrendous experiences with them, and I think all too often they're linked to promotions, and pay increases. So it's pretty high stakes poker when you're getting a performance review. I actually like to take the performance out of it and actually call it a coaching review, right? Just to sterilize that term and sort of say, hey, what we're trying to do is just play the sport better, play the team sport better. So I think I love how the Metronome software knits it all together, right? The scorecards there, we see the priorities that people have signed up to do, we see the metrics that they need to do. It makes it so tight to do even a 360 review with someone so they get good feedback, right? And I think feedback, A players, we all know this, A players want feedback. They crave it. They want to know how they're doing, right? So I think it's a gift to give timely feedback to people. And I'll extend that I actually think the one-on-ones, having structured one-on-ones was a game changer for me as well as I evolved as a CEO, right? Because now I had a format to actually not bottle up that frustration and be passive aggressive, right? As I was, but I was forced to address the feedback in the time against the scorecard and against the role, right? And I used to be a pressure keg. Like I would build and then I would go off, right? And this just is a really good mechanism to give people performance feedback in the moment with good examples each week. And then at the end of the quarter, they're going to get a really good, sort of coaching review where they get perspectives from all the team members.
Yeah, I love that term, coaching review. I've been looking for a better term to what the industry uses, and like you, I hate performance reviews. I think I might start using coaching reviews. That's a
Yeah,
good takeaway from our conversation today.
right.
So, so Peter, if you don't mind, I might bring us back to where you were struggling to sort of get yourself off the treadmill so that you could stop eating glass. Because way back, you had that revelation that something needed to change, um, but it can't be as easy as what you laid out. You laid out a couple of sequential steps that sort of make sense and everything, but we know it's not a straight line like that, don't we? So, what were the other things that you had to deal with as you were trying to extract yourself from the day to day?
Well, it's interesting, right? So, we talked about the organization function chart, which is just like, hey, what are the key functions on the leadership team that drive the business? And if you could flick a switch, when you're scaling up a business, you'd have one person in every seat. If you had, CAT was unlimited, but it's not a perfect world, is it? Right? Like we know we're all going to need to wear multiple hats for a period of time. But what I found, Jed, in that was I articulated what my preferred hat was, my unique ability. I was really good at this, and I detested doing these things, right? And I was probably doing them very poorly. So it gave us a roadmap as a leadership team for people to say, "Well, Peter, I'll help with that. I'll cover you. I'll take that hat." And when we can afford it, then we'll actually hire in, for instance, a full-time finance person or we're going to learn how to sell and then we'll bring in a salesperson or bring in a head of sales as we scaled up. So it gave a roadmap. I'm just giving one area where as long as you can see a light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of these things, you can suffer through a lot as an entrepreneur. But it's when we lose faith and hope that we don't know where we're going that people start to use terms like I'm burned out. I'm frustrated. Uh, Entrepreneurs and scale up leaders have a huge capacity to drive through stuff when they know where they're going, right? So I think it gave a framework. All the tools that we're having gave a framework for us to see that there was a future beyond the hamster wheel that we were on right now. Um, I think the second thing I would add, Jed, is just focus, right? So less is more, right? We used to just pile priorities on, like pile. I remember having quarters where we'd have 8, 10 priorities, company priorities. Now we were forced through the process of implementing that. Choose 3. Let's get really good at 3, right? And let's win at the 3 and let's choose the most important 3. So that forces you to say what you're going to stop doing as well, right? And that was probably as important as all these new things that we were starting to do, which was what's not working, what's less important, because there's no more hours in the day, right? So what are we going to focus on? So I think that was a very useful exercise to actually debate that out as a leadership team in a forum, in a planning session, and then taking it into our weeklies and monthly meetings from that, right? Always having that check. Are we working on the right things?
Yep. So, I mean, summing that up, I mean, it sounds like, you focused, well, there were three things. You wanted clarity of where you were going or what you needed to do. You then focused down, you doubled down on those things and made sure you didn't get distracted. And then you implemented discipline to make sure that you were executing on them and them alone so that you got them complete by the end of the quarter or the end of the year. So clarity, focus, discipline.
Yes. Well said. Well said.
Now, if you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you get notified when future episodes drop. So, Peter, you've got a bit of a unique perspective here. You struggled through as a CEO, as a sort of an in the weeds CEO, as I would call it, and then you had this revelation, this realization that things had to change, and you're now coaching CEOs and showing them how to avoid the pitfalls that you experienced. You must come across beliefs or a myth that you think is pretty common amongst CEOs. Is there one thing that you see regularly that you want to break, you want to correct when you work with them?
Oh, great question, Jed. Trying to narrow it down. So I think I'm gonna focus on the scaling up CEO, right? So where you're going into this the market opportunity is good. There's good go to market, product market fit. I think there's a real apprehension around letting go of people who got you to where you are, and knowing that you need to hit that next hurdle. And I don't care if it's going from 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 50, 50 to 100. We have to find a place for them. We have to keep them. They're part of the DNA of this organization. And so my comment back to them is to quote Jim Collins and say, let's be rigorous, not ruthless, right? So let's go back to the scorecards again and define what we need in order to hit that next threshold. And if there's a fit, and if we can actually develop the skills and competencies, and that person can develop into that, wonderful. That's an awesome, fantastic outcome. But if we have B's and C players, when we use that traditional 3x3 sort of matrix, we have to liberate the people. It's unfair to bring people in where they're tortured and they know they're getting consistent feedback in their one-on-ones and in their coaching reviews, that they are actually underperforming, right? So this myth that we have to keep everyone together that took us from where we are, the people have different seasons and different chapters, right? And people who really like the 0 to 10 million are probably not going to be a good fit for where we need to go to get to the 50 or to the 100 million, right? So I think it's that, addressing the players for the season. We won the beer league. Now we need to actually go and try and win the Super Bowl. We probably need to dress a different team.
That runs deep, doesn't it? The people that got you to where you are now are probably not going to get you to that next level. But there's that mistaken sense of loyalty in a lot of CEOs' minds where they feel they have to look after the people that got them there. And yes, they do, but it doesn't necessarily mean holding on to them forever, because that's then going to hold the organization back, and it's also going to hold the individual back, because they're now operating in a role that they're no longer suited to, and they're probably not enjoying it, and they're probably not doing a good job. So you need to, as you say, be rigorous but not ruthless. Find them some other place in the organization, because presumably they're a good cultural fit, because otherwise they wouldn't still be there, surely.
And we know from coaching that these are hard decisions. And man, these leaders just carry this weight on their shoulder. They know what they need to do, but they just carry the weight every day, and it just sits on them. And inevitably, when they make the move and the decision, usually the person's okay because they know they weren't a fit, and the organization just breathes easier, right? And I think is, it's a big reason why I named my coaching firm Oxygen Advisory. It's like, let's grow fast, but let's breathe easier, right? Like, so let's get these tough decisions, the hard conversations behind us, and actually, move through these in a very constructive, systematic way.
Yep. I've gone through exactly this situation with one of my clients over the last few weeks where one of the leaders had got to the point where they weren't really able to keep up. The organization was growing really, really fast. And the organizational needs in the leadership team were changing. And the individual could see it. The CEO could see it. The rest of the leadership team could absolutely see it. And it got to a point where something had to be done. So that person was just reallocated to another role in the organization. And they are so much happier. Now, their stress levels have gone from here down to here. Their satisfaction levels have gone from here down up to here. And they're happy in their work again because they're doing something that is within their abilities and their capabilities. And they know that the organization still loves them, but just not in the role that they used to do.
Amazing outcome, right? For all parties.
Yep. And it didn't happen without tears, but then it happened with smiles once it all sank in and they realized it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a process that you've got to work through. And it's a change is never easy. And if it's change that you are instinctively resistant to, because there's maybe a bit of pride, and there's the realization that maybe you can't take it to the next level. It's not always easy to accept, but once you do, it's much nicer.
And, people need to be true to their core values and their culture, right? In this, right? And I think that's something I learned from my first sort of venture in this was, we went through the best of times and the worst of times as a business. Um, I was probably a little bit to swing the axe really fast and quickly, chopping people out of the organization without going through that process that you're talking about, Jed. And it really rips at the company's culture. So I highly encourage CEOs to follow the process of one-on-one feedbacks, looking at the scorecards, giving that, and being fair to people when they actually need to move someone on from the organization. So that everyone in the organization understands why this is happening.
Putting you on the spot, Peter, if you were to take the stage in front of a group of fellow CEOs, what would be your 1-2 minute message to them about how they could make their lives easier? Because ultimately, what we do is all about helping CEOs create impact, but also sleep at night at the same time. What would your message to them be?
I think it follows the thread, the bouncing ball of my career, right? Which is, you don't need to be the hero. You don't need to actually be that superhero that takes all the blows on behalf of the organization. Hire an amazing team, right? Hire A players, the best people you can afford. Be clear with your expectations and where you're going. Play this as a team. Focus on your unique ability, the area that you actually really drive value, and make that 80% of what you're doing, right? And lean on the team to fill in the gaps. You do not need to do that. And the biggest thing is we all grow our businesses with the eye of exiting so that we can provide a better life for our family and financial freedom. Now, we tend to kick our family to the curb in the process of actually trying to get that financial freedom. So my advice would be turn it into an and statement. Grow a great business and have a good personal life. Do not put your family, your relationships, your partner in the back seat while you do this, because there's some pretty prolific examples of when you get your exit, they're not there with you anymore. I'm lucky enough to have a very patient wife that put up with me and still is, but there's lots of examples of entrepreneurs who have lost their families along the way. So do both. They can happen.
One question I always like to ask is what's the book that you would recommend CEOs study, read, absorb to help them through this particular problem about stopping eating glass and getting off the hamster wheel. Is there a book you'd put out there as being the Bible to absorb?
I'm not sure I'd say it's the Bible like on this, but I think it's a really good starting point, right? Because we all hear that expression, you should be working on the business, Jed, not in the business. And it's like, gosh, if I hear that one more time, I just need to know how to break the cycle, right? So there is a simple book that I will give to my CEO or business owner clients that I really see are on the hamster wheel. And it's Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time, because I actually think it has a recipe that you can follow that's very simple around figuring out how to stop and to break this cycle, right? And I think it has given great relief with a really simple, um, easy to follow framework that gets people to audit what they're working on and understand where they really drive value to the business and what they can start to get off their plates, right? And so I can't recommend it more as a place to start to get off the hamster wheel.
Well, it sounds like we should record a podcast just on that book as a topic in the future.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I think that's one big thing that we can give our clients as coaches is the gift of time, right? They do not, there's no more time in the day. We all have 24 by 7, days. So it's around giving them space to actually focus on the right things. And the more we can do to help them break the cycle, the better.
Okay, that was a great conversation, Peter. I'm sorry you had to eat glass for so long, and the fact you call yourself a slow learner, but the fact you become a certified coach in such a short period of time suggests otherwise. So I'm sure you've taken those learnings and you're applying them brilliantly to the CEO, clients, and leadership teams that you're working with.
Thanks, Jed. Yeah, I had the pleasure of actually being a client operating businesses for over 10 years on the system. So I have a lot of empathy for what these owners and CEOs are going through.
Yeah, and we've all been there. Anyone who's run a business knows how hard it is, but there is an easier way. Yeah.
There is.
Because ultimately you go further, faster with a coach. Tip Top is brought to you by Metronomics.
To find out more about Metronomics and how this proven 20-year-old system will save you time and money as you grow up your business,
visit metronomics.com. That is metronomics.com.
Share your thoughts on today's episode in the comments and suggest topics you'd love us to explore the next time.
Also search for Metronomics in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else that great podcasts are found.